welcome to Second Sunday Poetry Series. I'm the host, Sean Killingsworth. Today is Sunday, May 15th. We're a week delayed because it was Mother's Day last week. So that's typically, a big holiday, and a lot of people can't make it. So we will usually always stick to the second Sunday, but if there's a big holiday, we'll bump it. So here we are. I'm so happy to see everybody. We've got three terrific poets on the docket today, and we are going to start off with George Lober. Our second poet will be Barbara Quick, and the final poet will be Regan Pietrucha. George Lober is the author of two books of poetry, Gift of Light and A Bridge to There. His poems have appeared in numerous journals and e-zines, including the Monterey Poetry Review, Homestead Review, Eclectic Literary Forum, Quarry West, the Sandhill Review, Gulch Review, Red Wheelbarrow, and others. He's a former winner of the Ruth Cable Memorial Prize for Poetry, and he lives in Monterey, California. Welcome, George. If you can unmute yourself.
Thank you, Sean, very, very much. I want to thank Sean and thank the Monterey Poetry Center for facilitating this reading. And thanks to all of you who have Zoomed in this afternoon. It's humbling and great to see so many friends. I'm honored to be invited back to be part of this series, and I'm going to be reading from a manuscript of new and selected poems, the first of which is a small poem written early in the pandemic. It was, let me check here. Yeah, it was originally written early in the pandemic and then subsequently published in the weekly newspaper here, which is easily the least literary publication in which my poems have ever appeared. And yet it's also the one in which I received the most positive reader response, something which I'm not sure of, but which I'm not dismissing. This poem is Each Morning's Gifts. When beneath the marine layer, a clear horizon, a bay one shade grayer than the sky, tide swirling against the rocks, cormorants gliding in line above the surface, a Cooper's hawk on the phone line, deer in the meadows of scrub and sedge, scents of wormwort, bellflower, yarrow, lifting off dunes in a common breath, and our words carrying as we walk no trace of the thing eating this world or the fear it will someday find us. Only how the day will move on. Each morning's gifts should be received with kindness. Of course, not all gifts last, and one gift my wife and I recently lost was our small, very special needs rescue dog. And as those of you who've had to put a pet down at the veterinarian's office know, it can be a difficult, disassociating experience. This poem is after putting the dog down. At first, a sudden sense of wrenching loss, an irreparable tear in the air. An eclipse passing steadily across the clock above the door. As we stand there, statues in an examination room, neither of us able to speak or leave. Two spirits now bound to an instant tomb, reluctant to join the living and grieve. And yet eventually we comply, leave the room, the body behind, return to our car, the same traffic, same winter sky and silence as before, only to learn nothing else in the last hour has changed, except us, now torn apart and rearranged. Okay, that's as dark as this reading is going to go. We're going to start moving up from here. I have had the privilege of knowing several women in my life who, without their knowledge, have served as guideposts and mentors to me. by the wisdom and courage with which they faced the adversity in their life. This next poem refers to two such women. This is an unassuming grace. At this age, I have learned to look for stillness, but not silence, for continuance, not strength, to recognize the way the pines endure the threat of each fire season. To recognize the way the pines endure the threat of each fire season followed by winter, or the way this shore of rocks receives the tide's lashes year after year, while travelers return like pilgrims to stare in silence at its hard beauty, hoping to receive something for which they have no words. I'll call it an unassuming grace, and tell you I have only seen it twice in someone like you or me. The first in the eyes of an old woman progressively growing deaf and blind, who assured me each Tuesday morning, "It's a beautiful life, kid, as long as you don't weaken." And then again yesterday in the smile of a younger woman 5 years after her stage 4 diagnosis. How much younger, you might ask? That's not the point. It could be 3 years or 30, and her smile would be as unchanged as these hills will be 100 years from now. The point is, on 2 occasions, the air opened and I saw something beyond truth or courage, something as gracious as each gray morning in this place, as still as the first turn of maples and liquid ambers in September. Something beyond words I could look for and possibly find, receive, but not possess. I'm reminded on almost a daily basis that I'm growing older and the world is changing. One particular incident occurred just before the pandemic at my favorite coffee cafe, when I was suddenly informed it was no longer accepting cash, just credit cards or phone apps. Fortunately, I had the appropriate app to make my purchase, but I have to be honest, I found the implications unsettling. This poem is called Cashless. In the next to last scene of the movie of my life, I will stand before a young barista as I am today. Old man, tweed coat, collared shirt and slacks, listening as she tells me politely that as of now, the place is cashless. She will offer the news gently with kind eyes and olive skin. She will say it assuredly, as though we have shared the secret of this day's arrival all her young life. She will offer it calmly as the cue to a line I can't remember learning in a role I can't remember being cast. She will offer it as a fact without embarrassment or apology. And in the seconds it will take me to process her meaning, the weight of the first $50 I earned will press into my palm. And the ring of the cash register at Woolworths, where I spent each allowance, will echo in me like a cavern carrying the crash of the sea. In those seconds, I will see my father alive again, standing in line for the next available teller at a bank that no longer exists. I will see his steps shortened by the weight of 3 jobs a week, the pass of his paycheck across the counter, the teller's thumbing of the cash back, and his counting the bills back to her, a double check, before folding them into his wallet like prayers. All this while the hiss of the steam wand becomes the beat of the film soundtrack. The passing breath of phrases from my life. Cash on the barrel head, good as cash, cold hard cash, cash it in, cash only, low on cash. And I reach for my phone, dropping the app before the scanner, while the scene shifts to a morning sidewalk of commuters, a street alive with traffic, a city rushing to its own wounds and hopes, under a sky that will be blue by noon, on a day that eventually will end, but not cash out. And now, an old love poem. Sonora. For reasons which are not yet clear, I want you to know this morning how before dawn, orange thermos in hand, I walked back down the lumber road a quarter-mile to the clearing where, among the piles of dirt and sawdust chips, spittle of the chainsaw, we sat last August, smooth as one shadow on a jagged stump, breathing the wet wind tang of pine, shivering against the dusk and rain, the silence dropping brittle and uneven through the shadows around us. And how once there, alone, the dry smell of fresh cut wood, breath of coffee lifting from the cup in my hand, the early sun scattering your name like light. It became enough for one moment to hear the cicadas whine, to gauge the distance to the slow creek below, to admit finally that you are gone. Tomorrow, I know, may not be this easy. I'll close with just two more poems, only tangentially related to the fact that I finished my teaching career teaching a brush-up writing course and a course in ethics to members of the Special Operation Forces of the US military and the militaries of allied nations. And as you can imagine, I was often asked what it was like to teach such students. This poem is entitled, What They Do Not Do. On the first day of class, they do not enter smelling of red meat and dust. They do not enter in full battle rattle, Kevlar vest, wraparounds, helmets on, weapons at high ready. They do not sweep the room, taking tactical positions near their seats, or pull from book bags the dismembered limbs and beating hearts of comrades. They do not sit stone still at attention, eyes on point, listening to the shatter of IEDs, screams of dying, while waiting for me to speak. Rather, they enter in khakis and polo shirts, casual slacks and V-necks, take their seats randomly, pulling out laptops and tablets with wallpapers of quiet lakes, green hills, desolate peaks, pictures of fiancés, spouses, children honored with friends' names. They enter into light chatter, downrange lockdown, sipping from Red Bulls, snapping from sandwich bags of almonds and pieces of chicken, until I step forward, and their clear eyes say, "We're ready. We're here. Tell us, sir, something you think is important." I used to tell my students they did lots of courageous things, but if they wanted to know courage, they had to stand in front of a group like them and try to pretend that comma placement was important. And then this last poem is special. It was a gift. It has actually been transformed into a beautiful abstract painting, which now stands in the Dudley Knox Library at the Graduate Writing Center of the Naval Postgraduate School. The painting was commissioned by the students in the last class I ever taught and created by an artist in Colorado. Most of the patrons and visitors to the library who pass the painting have no idea that in the swirls of color, it actually contains the lines of a poem. Fortunately, and even better for me, they have no idea that it also contains a typo, an extra word from an earlier draft that I failed to delete before forwarding the digital file to the student in charge of the commissioning. A word which I might say is now doesn't fit in the poem and yet is preserved in it forever. So classic. This poem is Take a Moment. Take a moment, or if that's too much to ask, take this one. Take the next 60 seconds of this poem as a gift. No strings, no expectations, except maybe that you use them to take one breath that isn't deadline driven by something undone, or laced with work and worry at the thought of what is waiting for you at the job tomorrow. One breath that isn't racked by the 8 things you still have to do in a day with no slack. And don't worry. This moment promises not to turn spiritual and tell you everything in its own time or whenever you're ready. Let's face it. We both know things could be better. You could be better. But this is about realizing what it means to shoulder the weight of each day and shift it from sore hip to sore hip, only to get up tomorrow and do it again. So take this moment. Use it for one breath you can let out slowly, and trust that this poem knows it's all you can spare. Understands why you'll start again soon enough. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, George. Just wonderful, wonderful work. So glad to have you. All right, so our next poet is Barbara Quick. And let's see. Barbara Quick won the 2020 Blue Light Press Poetry Prize for her debut chapbook, The Light on Sifnos. A widely published writer, she is best known as the author of the 2007 novel Vivaldi's Virgins, which has been translated into a dozen languages and is currently in development as a mini-series. How cool is that? 5 of Barbara's poems were recorded by Garrison Keillor and recorded on the Writer's Almanac last year. She's been the featured guest several times on Grace Cavalieri's program from the Library of Congress, The Poet and the Poem. Barbara's newest novel is What Disappears, which I think comes out in just a couple of days. Is that right? Oops,
well,
Barbara, let me.
Well, right, 2 days. 2 days.
2
yeah.
days. I'm going to spotlight you now.
Hi.
Hey, welcome.
Thank you so much. I was blown away by your poems, George. They're just gorgeous. Thank you. I could just leave it at that, just have listened to your poems. I'm very glad to be here, and I'm really glad that my publisher from Blue Light Press is here, Diane Frank. Hi, Diane. And I am going to read some poems from the chapbook, The Light on Sifnos, which is this one. And I'm also going to read some newer poems, and some of which I haven't actually read in public before. So I'm, going out on a limb a bit here, but I really wanted to. So thank you, Sean. And I'll start. The Light on Sifnos. How does one describe the light here in this place where the dawn really does have rosy fingers, where the mountains glow at night, their barren slopes a magnet for the radiance of moon and stars, where whitewashed houses on the lowest slopes are strung like chalky pearls around the mountain's throat, and oleander blossoms burn like hot pink coals. The shadows are as deep as wells, the air as clear as something newly born. Even early morning light burns its mark on tender human skin, as if the sun were reaching down to tell us that we're changing as surely as the plants that bloom and fade, each bright blossom's moment giving way to new ones. The ferry comes and goes many times every day, bringing bright new tourists to the island, taking others away. I wrote about some of the people I got to observe in the port town. And this is one that actually Diane nominated for a pushcart prize, which was really wonderful. It's called The Mad Car Washer of Camaris. Across the way from our cottage, half hidden by a wall, he shouts and sprays the rental cars his boss drives over from the port. His head is bare, his gray hair long, his face and neck a mask of scars. He handles the high-pressure hose as if it were a weapon, and he a warrior. Did his forebears live on the mountainside that's backdrop to his labor, their brown arms wielding bronze to make the rock give up its gold? Apollo rental cars seems anything but old, and yet the madman they employ evokes the ghosts of ancient Greece. Hard-muscled men whose arguments still echo in the valley, whose joys were brief and violent, whose only comforts were women, drink, and sleep, or maybe sheep. It probably didn't matter much to them. What kind of life is this, washing tourists' dusty cars all day, explosively, compulsively, angrily, one at a time? The boss, Apollo, is pale-skinned and tall, his beard as neatly trimmed as that of any immortal god. He drives too fast down our one-lane road. They shout at one another. It sounds as if they'll come to blows. The ferry brings more tourists to the island. Apollo picks them up in bright and shiny cars. This is another one from the island called The Pilgrim's Road. Who can guide us on this journey up this rock-strewn mountainside, studded with thistles and thorns? Who will guide us down again on the final leg of our passage in the moonless dark? How will we manage when it's so hard now, both of us still strong enough to walk the pilgrim's road with all the others young and old, their faces tinged with rosy light? How can we fill our hearts with hope when we harbor no illusions of a light-filled God who'll hold us when we stumble through that final backlit passageway, all substance of self dissolving in the ocean of sky? The island of Sifnos, I found, was rather a haunted place. I had a lot of mystical dreams there and even visions. This is a poem that came from a dream directly, called The Bread My Mother Gave Me. She apologized that it was probably stale, but how could it not be when handed to me in a dream on a visit from the afterlife? It had honey baked into the middle and was more delicious than any bread I'd ever tasted. I told her how grateful I felt for this sustenance from her, however late it came, for the loving way she looked at me across that distance between life and death, a hand's breadth between us, as I received that holy bread and ate to fill that hungry place inside me. This one is called My Father's Maritime Compass. I didn't realize when I packed it that it wasn't meant to find one's way on land, pointed at a lighthouse, pointed at the pole star. If you'd taught me how to use it, I could journey through the starry nights by sea, like Odysseus, with 50 strong men at the oars and a goddess watching over me. I would stand there at the helm, once again your cherished child, face tipped upward, eyes focused on the luff of the sail. Flush with your approval for my light touch with the tiller, I'd point us into the wind as close as I could without causing us to jibe. You taught me how to crew, to wait until that moment when the jib went slack, and then pull swiftly on the line, hand over hand, ending in a final tug, my feet in white-soled sneakers braced against the coaming of the cockpit, wind the jib sheet round the winch and make it fast, clinched between the teeth of the cam cleat, shove the heavy handle in and ratchet clockwise while I or someone stronger tailed the line. Some things, it's true, you taught me well, but how to find my way in life and love was not among these. I wish you had your compass with you now as you journey through the darkness with the other shades, maybe here on this island, in the starlight, on the naked rocky slopes that seem to hold the dead inside them, glowing at night with all they loved and hoped for, all they lost, and all they failed to find. This is one of the newer poems called Impunity. I know you want impunity for all you do and say. Each day is a fresh start in your mind and heart. You have a gift for finding just the right toxic words, spoken or shouted with authority, that gives them a long half-life. Words that question my worth as a person, a writer, and a wife. Words that resonate with the longest lasting judgments of my value pressed into my ears so effectively and well by that most significant other. Beneath the layers, you're empty, not good enough inside to deserve a mother's love. And you look just like your father, who made my life a living hell. I'm bleeding today inside my empty self from all my wounds, old and new, knowing that I'm not good enough and won't ever be, no matter how hard I work or what I achieve, no matter how tenderly you tell me today, just before you leave, as she did at the end, that you love me so much. Another new poem, less grim, well, a little grim. This is called Dawn of the Whale. I can understand why the creature who evolved into the whale decided to abandon the land in favor of the sea. A no-brainer to lose the shackles of gravity and slip into a life of weightlessness, unfettered mobility. I know how heavy one's own flesh and bones can feel on the path of beaten dirt bordered by wilderness and wild beasts. Impossible to go backwards, a cliff at the end. How easily I could slip off the edge of all I've ever known, exchange the fertile elements of earth and air for the wordless, salty surrounds of water everywhere. And back to the island. This is called Old Men on Their Motorbikes. I love the old men on their motorbikes looking so happy, as if they've stolen years they thought were lost to them, cheated death in a last mad, joyful dash for freedom on a narrow, perilous, one-lane road. And this, which I always love to read because people seem to like it a lot. And it was wonderful hearing Garrison Keillor read this poem. I just loved it. Skinny dipping in Vathi. Above the azure inlet of the sea, the path was steep, carved out between the thistles, thorns, and windblown rock. He left her at the top to find a sheltered place they wouldn't be seen descending to the shore. She waited, fully clothed there, till looking down, she saw his gleaming skin and upturned face above the churning deep, as if he'd changed from man to seal, and loved this transformation. She shed her clothes and picked her way as far down as she could on tender feet, then took a leap of faith, exchanging rock for empty air, a rush of cold and bubbles in her hair. Her toes touched seaweed as she swam toward her Selkie mate. Two naked, slippery people, 70 and 65, feeling so alive and filled with joy, treading water side by side in the extra salty turquoise blue Aegean Sea, rich in iodine, with the power to heal all kinds of wounds. They tasted salt and kissed, two shipwrecked sailors who'd managed to survive. I find a lot of poems in my garden, and this is one of them. The feeling of earth on my fingers. Sometimes I like to take the gloves off to pull the weeds and gather the harvest barehanded, to remember this is earth, not dirt, to keep my body's memory fresh, here where the roots twine down, searching for sustenance, here where the worms create their magic. This will be my bed. A flower bed, perhaps, a vegetable garden blushing with its own abundance. These plants, all of them, are wiser than I will ever be. They know how to drink the mist and make the most of every photon of sunlight and moonlight too, living ever in their moment of life. Praise the wisdom of the wanderers who kiss the earth upon at last returning home. And I'll end with this poem called 1,000 Paper Airplanes. If I could fold 1,000 paper airplanes from the pages of poetry and prose stacked one-sided in the recycling box beneath my desk, if when I launched them from a high place, bright white against the blue sky, they could, as in an animated film or fever dream, turn into birds. If those messengers freighted with my words could fly to lands where readers wait with cupped hands, ready to hold each feathered arc, to feel the warm, fluttering heart encased inside. If all that I am and all that I've written could come to rest in soil that feeds a family of redwoods or a stand of smooth-skinned madrones. If forest mushrooms could weave a silver cocoon of life over what remains of me. If in my transformation, I could give my skin, my flesh, my bones, and all my printed words back to the trees. Thank you very much.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Barbara.
My pleasure.
Just lovely. You know, it's funny, after attending and hosting so many poetry readings, I feel as though almost every poet says, okay, the next poem isn't going to be so dark. This next one won't be so grim. And I think it is perhaps the job of poets to transform what is painful into something that is beautiful. So thank you, both George and Barbara, for doing just that. And our next poet is Raegen Pietrucha.
Pietrucha, but that's okay.
Oh, sorry, say it again.
It's Pietrucha. The C is silent.
Thank you.
No
I
worries.
apologize.
That's okay.
Okay, so let me introduce you. So Raegen Pietrucha, yes, writes, edits, and consults creatively and professionally. Her chapbook, An Animal I Can't Name, won the 2015 Two of Cups Press competition. Her debut poetry collection, Head of a Gorgon, is forthcoming just like almost immediately from Vegetarian Alcoholic Press, and she has a memoir in progress. She received her MFA from Bowling Green State University, where she was an assistant editor for Mid-American Review. Her work has been published in Cimarron Review, Puerto del Sol, and other journals. You can connect with her on her website and also on Twitter. And she is a very faithful and chatty Twitter personality, so. All right, lots of fun. Thank you. Now take it away, please.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Sean, for having me. And also thank you for what you said about the dark poetry thing, because I'm sorry to inform everybody, but everything I'm going to read is dark. And it is what it is. But yeah, hopefully there's some beauty in it as well. And I also wanted to acknowledge George and Barbara's fantastic work. It's awesome and such a privilege to read with both of you as well. So thank you. Because this reading is a little bit longer than what I'm used to, I wanted to take an approach that I used for a longer reading that I did actually at my job, where I'm going to pair a poem by another poet with one of mine. I like to think of poetry and, well, actually all literature is kind of a dialogue of sorts. And so I'll kind of elaborate on some of the common themes or threads that I see, and then read those poems. But a little bit about the poems of mine. These are all from the forthcoming collection, which is out officially this week, but can be ordered right now through Vegetarian Alcoholic Press's website, which if you really want an easy way to remember it, it's just vapoetry.com. Like it just loads you right there. So if you like what you hear today, feel free to take a look at the book. The book is a reimagining of the myth of Medusa and her experiences of sexual violence. So I also wanted to do a trigger warning in case that kind of material or content is triggering for anybody here. I am probably not the reader for you to listen to, and you may want to mute or step away or find other tools to support yourself in the event that something is triggering for you. So I just wanted to give a heads up. I don't get super graphic in any of my work, but I do touch on these subjects. So with that, I wanted to start with a poem from a book that was published posthumously by Jason Schinder's colleagues. This is his book, Stupid Hope. And I saw some kind of mirrorings in one of his poems and then one from Head of a Gorgon that I'm going to read, kind of on the subject of human ruin, I guess, is one way to think about it. This is his poem, Jacksonville, Vermont. Because I am not married, I have the skin of an orange that has spent its life in the dark. Inside the orange, I am blind. I cannot tell when a hand reaches in and breaks the atoms of the blood. Sometimes a blackbird will bring the wind into my hair, or the yellow clouds falling on the cold floor are animals fighting each other out of their drifting misery. All the women I have known have been ruined by fog and the deer crossing the field at night. In my reimagining, Medusa experiences sexual abuse at more than one hand. So it's not just Poseidon, it also happens earlier in her life. I've imagined a childhood for her in my version as well. This poem is about that. It's called Sex Ed. Sex ed came late, spring of 8th grade, before lunch and after a classmate had trouble brewing in her stomach already. They put the job in the hands of an English teacher, Miss Fithy, pretty, stupid, lean, in the habit of wearing tight jeans and propping her bottom on the edge of her desk, easily seen by boys who would flock to the front for prime viewing. Slides of parts that flowers and cartoon characters had masked for us flashed as she matched image to word like some game, but never said what it meant if you'd already seen more than what appeared on the screen. Never confessed that naming things commands nothing. I sat silent like the dumb majority, wondering what those kids might be thinking, interrupted by a hiss of memory unzipping, something terrible swelling in me when I thought of these bodies and others I was forced to know with my own, and early. This next pairing considers the subject of trust and the consequences of trusting or not. This is one of my favorite poems by my pressmate, one of my pressmates from Vegetarian Alcoholic Press, V.C. McCabe, and this is her poem, Papier-Mâché. I befriended the red paper wasps flying around my garden. I sang as they circled me. I watered the flowers they pollinated. Such camaraderie, such peace, such subtle symbiosis. Eventually, I no longer noticed them. I forgot they were even there. When I felt a strange weight on my leg, I looked down to see the wasps attaching their honeycombed fibrous nest to my lonely skin, making a new home of my body. I watched the nest grow bigger, consuming one leg, then the other, swaddling all of my limbs, creeping up my torso like an invasive vine curling around a dying tree. The nest cocooned my throat so I couldn't breathe, sealed my mouth so I couldn't scream, covered my eyes so I couldn't see what too much trust made of me. And then this is my poem, Cheer. The only words I feel safe speaking, I scream alongside a team, combining them with sharp chops and kicks, a killer smile. 11 girls and I devote our weekdays to memorizing litanies of victory, and our boys spring higher each year as if our words are manna. Atop the pyramid, held like a house on a rock, my faith never wavers. I feel the girls' mass will always lift me as it does the team, soaring, however briefly, above enemies, undefeated, untouchable, immaculate. And on the weekend, when I can get away from him, I run far past the fence out back, hide my practice, a zealot casting spells, certain the right words paired with the right actions will someday help me become too mighty to be vincible, recalling perfectly the patterns and tracks, vital when you're the only one who's ever coming to your defense. This next pairing considers knowledge and ignorance, what we can ignore and what can't be held back forever. This poem is by my mentor and thesis advisor, Larissa Sporluck, and it's called Two-Headed Mule. This hill has a brow. I swim into the wind like a duck, like a bar of soap. In the long paragraph about joy, I learned that ignorance has eyelids and Sundays are the small eternal life I am owed. I don't know what becomes of an unrubbed stone, so I fix like a cloth to the world I know and rub to make sure I don't know. And then this poem is part of a series of dialogue poems right around the middle of the book. And this is Medusa's lesson at the ranch. What desert reminds me, secrets can hide from outsiders, but not from my body. Its curves consumed by sand, heels up to thighs, back, and clinging sweaty to my neck. What if I say more? Cows don't know they're fed fat for slaughter. Their calves will forget them. This knowledge won't change the patchwork of hide and land that cloaks daily affairs like the quilt you lie over, not under us, gnats swimming in our humidity. What desert reminds me? Secrets can hide from outsiders, but for how long? The hurts my mouth blurts, betray but don't end your quest. The sand is shadowing, turning a bolder version of itself. You're bolstered over me, stained by sweat, sun, dusty stalks of electrified straw. The sun falls and all I can do is try to find something sharper than the pain. Clouds above unravel sky like hides ripped, revealing the red of an animal I can't name. After, I sit in a tub with no water. Then I sit on a porch. It's morning once more. A herd speaks from the distance, too far to see. The land remembers its lot and feeds it. The earth remembers its purpose, continues to break beneath teeth. This next pairing is about kind of how memory and trauma can sort of inhabit or become part of the physical body. This is part of Citizen by Claudia Rankine. If you haven't checked out this book, it's phenomenal. It focuses on race, the subject of race, but I saw some overlaps with the trauma, the body, the memory, and all of those kind of overlapping themes. The world is wrong. You can't put the past behind you. It's buried in you. It's turned your flesh into its own cupboard. Not everything remembered is useful, but it all comes from the world to be stored in you. Who did what to whom on which day? Who said that? She said what? What did he just do? Did she really just say that? He said what? What did she do? Did I hear what I think I heard? Did that just come out of my mouth? His mouth? Your mouth? Do you remember when you sighed? This poem captures the physical transformation of Medusa. It's called Transfiguration. 1, duplicitous blood. Once my blood moved nothing like red. Then ache cut down to the veins, overthrew the blue liquid my body breathes through. Now that fickle drip sticks beneath my skin in purpled pools, confused, seeking a new retreat, as if water or wine could take its place, as if the sun could stretch far enough to touch and warm me, as if red could travel far enough back to resurrect a girl felled in the grass at sunset. 2, defeated wings. My back strains beneath the weight of a black, broke divinity. Holy leaves flap in the breeze, but their words don't restore me. I can't flee this body. My mind can't find a peak to soar to. The weight of memory tethers me. 3, unblinking eyes. I'd saved my gaze to search for a hero, only to find another predator's conceit. Now salt singes my sockets. Vigilant beacons forget the comfort of closing, refuse any respite from their watch. 4, hardened hands. Foolish digits will forget how they almost submitted, cringe at the thought that they once sought another's. Battle-bruised knuckles proved useless, shriek as they bend. A new mold must be poured. I swim my hands in. To burn in guilt now might make me invincible once the heat's depleted. 5, forking tongue. They might say, with this spoiled mouth, I slander. but they split me. My tongue senses the stench they left in stereo. Trespassers treading the end of this plank, you're the venom I retch from. 6, snaking mane. No body could bear such warfare. My head delivers riddles of persistent hisses, forbidden liberation for so long. Twisted hair springs, slithers, claims my scalp's terrain and crowns my fate, thanks to these men, the oblivious birth of my serpents. And then this last pairing is by, well, the first poem is by a former colleague from grad school, Julie Platt, now her last name's Alexander. And these poems both consider interesting, unusual father-daughter relationships. So the parents do appear in my collection as well. This is Julie's poem, Les yeux sans visage, which means the eyes without a face. What I am now has much to do with the number of diamonds left in the world. There's been an accident, and I am the child of a scientist. My father lays the phases of my face out in his mind like an undressing interrupted. He's looking for one among the many. I think all diamonds must be raw inside, like the girls he carries down the dark staircase of ether to be mined. When I surfaced from that same numb dusk, I was a multiple, an infinite pack of dogs, the red crawls of my raw face naming themselves you and you, I am you. Did you know skin keeps that wild howl down below the surface? Sometimes you hear it when you die, if they flay you, if your face is turned towards the dirt. Did I tell you I was born with a caul? Caul bearers cannot drown. My nurse pressed it between photographs, and father kept it with his mother's diamonds. I'm to have them on my wedding day. I am the bride of a scientist. It has something to do with my face, with the number of faces left in the world, with the number of times a name stretches over a gaping hole and snaps back. That wretched sound shocked back into the raw cawing. My diamond, father weeps. And then this is my poem. This is the last poem of the collection. It's called Raven Father. You didn't make me Raven Father, unkindness did. You didn't see who split your girl too soon from the shell, couldn't hear the shivers of downless skin. You only ever saw me after, these dark hinged wings, a double life already begun. One father, 2 masters, but sentry, I had none. I was so happy you sat with me, father, in hospital. Diagnosis, half raven with 2 brains raining my head, flapping and falling backwards through memory, finding only endless twisted slacks. Half raven with black breasts cracked open, blue tumor beating back forth back behind viperous ribs. Unkindness, it seems, runs in this blood. Halves foreign to each other struggle to fit, incurably different. You asked me what I saw in my reflection once, father, not knowing the tenor of your question. When I'd perched before a surface, I'd mostly notice shadows, what's stuck with things beneath a shine light. You said, you can tell me anything. I'd waited 2 lifetimes for any man's kindness to reach me, and I returned it, tucked words no bird should ever know under tongue. Fledglings can't be heroes, father. The small don't dare spring with unversed wings. They recite terms they've heard but can't grasp, rattles demanding salvation, deliver us from how swiftly a flock of unkindness will wizen us. Then we pray for age or an end, invent reticent melodies, peck and peck at our binding ties. You'd be so proud now, this sharp beak of mine. Split for collision, my halves now collaborate, fray unkindness's grip like scissors. Father, sometimes I saw your black pain flapping, but birds can never remain in sky. Why should I name who happened? Could that ever measure their infinite unkindness? Let me share these notes instead. Forgive what I've hidden in this odd soldered shell. Trust the blind flight alongside shadows I'm a shepherd. Your daughter's a crux, but recovered from the squall, resolved, shaping a haven with these pitchy songs. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Raegen. So many incredible poems, and I love the pairing with other poets. What a fun and interesting way to shake things up a little bit. So thank you for that. Well, I thank you all for coming. Let's see if I can do this. I'm so glad you all came. This has been truly a lovely afternoon, or I guess evening for some of you. George, Diane, and Raegen, thank you so much for bringing such excellent poems. I do stand by my previous statement that poets absolutely do the work of transforming pain into beauty. So thank all three of you for that. Thanks to everybody for attending, and thank you to Marin Poetry Center for loaning us their Zoom room. We have been borrowing that since the beginning of the pandemic, and thank you. The recording of this will be up on the YouTube channel in probably a few days. I'm going to have to edit it a little bit. And our next SSPS reading date is on Sunday, June 12th, and I hope to see all of you there. Thanks again, and have a wonderful evening. I'll see you next time.